Good afternoon, and welcome to the FEMA Region 2 Individual and Community Preparedness Webinar Series. My name is Allison Albright, and I am the Regional Preparedness Liaison for FEMA Region 2. I'm going to provide a few technical considerations before we begin. Today's proceedings are being recorded and captioned. The archived event will be available on the FEMA website in the coming days. You should hear audio through your computer speakers, so please ensure your volume is turned up so you may hear the proceedings accordingly. In the top right corner, we ask if you'd like to receive news and updates from Region 2, and if so, please enter your email address and we'll be sure to add you to the distribution list. We will have a question and answer session after the presentation concludes. You'll see a Q&A pod in the lower right-hand corner. Please feel free to submit your questions about the subject matter there, and time permitting, we'll do our best to answer them. Finally, the PowerPoint presentation from today will be available for you to download in the file share pod as a PDF. You can click on the file and download it using the download button. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the Region 2 Community Preparedness Officer to introduce our speaker and today's proceedings.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Debbie Casa, the Community Preparedness Officer for FEMA Region 2. On behalf of our team working to strengthen preparedness across New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, I'm so happy to welcome you to our Preparedness and Resilience Lunch and Learn webinar series. FEMA's Goal 1 is to build a culture of preparedness. The Region 2 Individual and Community Preparedness Program is focused on preparing communities for disasters by providing useful information and training, inspiring people to take actions, and be ready for any emergency. As part of that goal, we're pleased to be hosting this Lunch and Learn series for National Preparedness Month. Today's webinar will feature steps that every owner can take to make his or her home safer and reduce impacts from storms. The presenter, John Miller, will cover the simplest mitigation techniques for a homeowner, like clearing your gutters, to the most complex, like elevating your home, that requires specialized expertise. John Miller is the mitigation liaison on the New Jersey FEMA Integration Team. He is a licensed professional engineer, a certified floodplain manager, and certified stormwater manager. He joined FEMA in August 2018 after over 20 years in the private sector, performing engineering design, reviews, and authoring expert reports. John, I'm going to hand the mic over to you.
Thanks so much, Debbie. And I welcome everyone to this Lunch and Learn. It's great to be able to present to you. So we're going to talk about mitigation steps for the homeowner. Many mitigation projects are large projects, whether they're elevating a number of homes and structures. It could be also regional type of or community type of mitigation where you're building a detention basin. You might be doing some kind of smaller levees. You might be doing raising roads, things like that. But we're going to talk today about things that a homeowner can do. And again, some of these would be the homeowner, him or herself can do, or it can also be with the help of a contractor. So as Debbie mentioned, the culture of preparedness is important also under mitigation, because what we're doing is preparing for a future disaster. We're doing things prior to an event, and we're reducing vulnerability is what mitigation is all about. So in the disaster cycle, of course, response and recovery are after an event, but mitigation and preparedness are preparing for an event. And again, mitigation is really reducing your vulnerability or your exposure to an event. And that event can be a flood, it could be a high wind event, it could be hail, it could be a number of different things, earthquake. So we're going to talk about a few of these today. So mitigation, yes, we're going to talk about everything from cleaning your gutters to elevating a structure. This is a photo of a home being, an existing home being elevated in Union Beach, New Jersey. along the Monmouth County Bayshore. And this, of course, this is too much for most homeowners to do. This requires a universal lifting machine. You see these blocks under the home, keeping this up in the air. They're then going to build a foundation under that. They'll have to extend utilities to that home. That's a lot of work, and that would be like an extreme case of what you can do for your home. But it is under mitigation, and it is something that, especially if you're experiencing repetitive flooding, if you're having substantial losses frequently, this is a good technique to consider. Of course, there is a lot of money needed for that, and there are FEMA mitigation programs available to do this scale of work. So again, mitigation is the effort to reduce vulnerability and exposure to the harmful impacts caused by disasters. Again, this can be many different types of disasters. You're reducing loss of life and property by lessening the impacts of disasters. So again, we're not just protecting property, we're protecting the inhabitants of that property. So these type of techniques are, they're mitigation not just for the structure, but the people that occupy the structure. So, and again, mitigation in most cases is a pre-disaster step. It's reducing something before a disaster. Of course, there are mitigation things that can be done, later on in the recovery process. But in most cases, we're trying to do mitigation ahead of feeling an impact. So let's talk about some real basic flood risk mitigation. So again, it sounds very simple. It sounds, almost in passing, but clearing debris from your gutters and downspouts, as simple as that sounds, it can make a difference. We are experiencing heavy downpours, and when water comes off your roof and falls adjacent to your foundation, it can run into your basement. So something as simple as getting those gutters working and getting those downspouts, and then directing the downspout discharge away from your foundation, getting it away from that edge, can make a big difference in terms of your basement flooding during a heavy downpour. And this goes also with grading or channeling the water away from the home foundation. So it is, people can lose a lot of valuables, they can lose a lot of contents, and they can lose mechanical systems in a basement, such as a furnace, such as a hot water heater. They can lose these things in a basement that gets flooded. This is pretty important too, is store your valuables and important documents at a higher elevation. The basement, especially if it experiences even groundwater, high groundwater type of wetness, it's better to keep those valuables in a different location. Again, a lot of things people have are not replaceable, and they're best stored at a higher elevation. And here's one thing: make sure the sump pump in the basement is working. This is something that I do every time a big storm is on the way, or every time I hear a heavy rainfall. I just make sure my sump pump's working. That's as simple as lifting the float and just making sure it's on. And someone may have unplugged that sump pump to run, let's say, like a vacuum or something. You want to plug that thing back in. There might have been a fuse that got triggered that you want to reset. But anyway, that's something you want to make sure is working. The sump pump is there to evacuate the water from your basement, and not doing that can result in flooding. Moving ahead to some more advanced techniques. So a sump pump's only as good as it has power. So installing a battery backup or making sure that your home is serviced by a generator to make sure that sump pump works. Also, elevating your electrical and mechanical equipment. So once again, you could have, in your basement a furnace, you could have a hot water heater, you could have other mechanical equipment down there. All of that is potentially damaged during a flood, and elevating that equipment as much as you can would be a good thing to do. Certainly, elevating certain units will not work. And then if that's not possible, can you create a barrier around that equipment? So it would be a masonry wall, or it could be another type of flood barrier that you could install, and it would save that equipment from getting damaged. Once again, it's not just the damage at the time of event, but it's the time that it takes to restore these services. So I recall very well after Sandy how cold it was, and when you're out of power, when you're out of you're missing a utility, you can really suffer as an individual. Also using water-resistant materials. So if you have a finished basement, if you get flooding, carpeting's not a good idea. Using something like marine-grade plywood that is less susceptible to saturation after a flood event. Those would be important things to use. Tile, other types of materials that can get wet and they are not destroyed. Installing a backflow preventer in your sewer lateral. So this is the line that leads from your house out to the sewer. And that's really big because it might not even be your specific location, your house, that experience a flood, but the system itself. It could be ponding in the road. It could be backing up of the system, and the worst thing that you want is that coming into your home. So putting in a backflow preventer, it's an automatic valve that only lets water one way. It's kind of like a heart valve that when your heart pumps, your blood flows in one direction. That's what a backflow preventer basically does. And again, with more repetitive flooding, you want to consider elevating the home. So again, that's a pretty drastic move, but it could be the one way that you take care of your flood risk. So some options for other hazards. Again, we get wind. We have wind hazards. There's all types of different hazards. So for wind, having equipment outside your home, patio furniture, anything that can get airborne and cause damage to your home or your neighbor's home, is you want to bring those inside during, and not during, but before a disaster takes place. Consider purchasing a generator. We're more and more all the time dependent on power, and whether it's for our communications, it's the way we work now from home. So a generator can give you some more peace of mind and that uninterrupted power during an event and after an event. Garage doors are very susceptible to high wind events. So whether it's reinforcing the track that the garage door runs on, or installing bracing that you temporarily position, behind the garage door on the living side of the garage door, so that that garage door does not get blown in, or pressure builds and gets forced out. So reinforcing those garage doors, you're possibly preventing damage to your vehicle and then other components in your house. So reinforcing roofing and gutters, whether it's the roofing systems, whether it's the covering material, the gutters if they're not not attached well to the home, they can be flying debris. So those type of things too. and installing hurricane shutters. And so hurricane shutters are basically, they're like a shutter, a decorative shutter that we often see, but they install in front of the window and protect the window from especially flying objects. And again, it's not just the damage to the window, but once the window is broken, then you can have a lot of damage from the rainfall that gets into the home. So finally, I like to think of what do you do when you have exceeded or when you've exhausted your opportunities to mitigate. So you're trying to do as much as you can to physically reduce your vulnerability, and then, due to cost, due to physical constraints, due to just limitations, maybe you as a homeowner, you just can't do some of these things. Insurance is your next step, and that covers what you haven't mitigated. So once again, floods happen anywhere. Anywhere it can rain, it can flood, is what we like to say at FEMA. And coastal storms are not the only cause of flooding. We're seeing a lot of urban flooding. We're seeing a lot of poor drainage areas, systems that are overwhelmed, storm sewer systems, conveyance systems. And flood damage is really costly. We like to say that an inch of water in a home can cause $25,000 of damage. So we like to, let's get that covered so that you're not out that money come an event. When you do mitigation techniques, when you elevate a home, or some of these other things, clearing your gutter is not going to lower your flood insurance premium, but a number of these techniques, and as we move to a new rating system called Risk Rating 2.0, there will be ways of getting discounts on your insurance when you do these mitigation techniques. So it's really important to have insurance, make sure you're covered, and whether that, again, is through the FEMA National Flood Insurance Program or through a private carrier, insurance is your way to bounce back after a flood event. So that's what I have for you today, is just touching on some mitigation techniques. I'm happy to follow up with anyone that wants to get in more detail. And I appreciate your attention, and thank you very much, Debbie and Allison.
Thank you, John. I appreciate all that great information. Sometimes you think, oh, we work at FEMA, we should know these things, but every time I hear you or someone from mitigation talk, I always get another tip, so certainly appreciate it. We did have one question from the audience, and their question was regarding elevation. When elevating mechanical equipment, is there a recommended minimum height to elevate one's home?
So typically, we want to see you elevate above what's called the base flood elevation. So that would be the elevation shown on the flood insurance rate maps, or what we commonly call the FEMA maps. But you want to check in with your municipality and learn if they have an additional elevation they apply to work you're doing. So that would be a local freeboard or an extra factor of safety that you want to add on to that elevation. So the best thing to do is to get in touch with your community, your municipality, and ask to speak to the floodplain manager or the floodplain administrator. That will be someone who can educate you on what the elevation that community wants you to elevate to.
Thank you. I was actually just going to ask where do you start, with a municipality, but floodplain manager, great. For those who have homes with basements, could you speak to the value of flood insurance for them?
Yeah, so typically flood insurance has limited coverage for basements. I mean, I'm talking about the NFIP policies. So it will cover your mechanicals. It will cover but again, it's limited in terms of what it can cover in a basement, such that if you have a finished basement, you have, a lot of furniture and, it's completely furnished, and a finished basement, that is not all covered in a base policy.
Okay. And someone like me who maybe has their photo albums and, some of their most prized possessions in the basement may want to consider doing some elevation within the space themselves.
Yeah, I think you could, if you could move it to a higher floor, if you don't have room to do that, would there be something that you could, shelves in the basement if you don't expect the whole basement to fill during a flood event? If it's just, a wet basement versus a flooded basement. But yeah, keeping those valuables, maybe using watertight containers or, for your most valuable items. So once things get wet and saturated, they're very, very hard to clean and to restore. So yeah, I would say, best to worst is, get it out of the basement. If you can't, then there's some other techniques you can use.
Somebody commented in the chat that they are converting all their photos to digital in order to ensure their safety. It's funny because that really is among most of our most prized possession, yet we seem to take the least amount of steps to ensure that we continue to have them. John, is Risk Mitigation 2.0 available for West Coast, and are you working with any California earthquake authority?
So Risk Rating 2.0 will be specific to flood insurance. And if you do a web search on risk, FEMA Risk Rating 2.0, you'll get an idea what that looks like. I know FEMA I specifically am not engaged in retrofitting for earthquakes, but FEMA does do that, and we have earthquake programs.
Thank you. Are there mitigation guidelines or suggestions for homes built on cement slabs?
Yes, there are a number of publications. If the person asking the question can send an email to you, Debbie, or Allison, I can make sure that I could send along the publication. So yeah, a house built on a slab presents some challenges for an elevation project, but they're not insurmountable. I have seen a lifting company elevate a home on a slab, and it is very doable.
Okay. Thank you. And I just put the FEMA-R2-prepares email address on the screen, so if anybody has additional questions for John, you could email us in the preparedness division, and we would be happy to share them with John. John, I'd like to thank you for presenting today, for all of the very valuable information that you're able to deliver during a short lunchtime span, and I'd like to thank our participants for spending some of their lunchtime with us today. We do have quite a few webinars coming up, a dozen or so planned for October alone, but on your screen right now you can see tomorrow we're going to be talking about financial disaster preparedness. This week is National CERT Week, so we're going to have a few different CERT teams talking about best practices during deployment. Next Tuesday we'll have our final delivery of a Lunch and Learn series from our last division, recovery. So preparing to recover, what FEMA can and cannot do, really helps to manage expectations. Kicking off October, which is National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, with someone from CISA talking about best practices on how you as individuals or small businesses or a house of worship can pay a little bit more attention and be more cyber savvy when it comes to connecting to the web. Powerful presentations on October 6th. And a whole bunch more going into October, including earthquake preparedness for the Great American Shakeout on October 14th and 15th in both Spanish and English. Today's webinar and all of our webinars are recorded and can be found by clicking the link here in the middle that says recordings. If you want to see what future webinars we have coming up, anything that we've already planned can be found at the first link. And if you'd like to get Region 2 news, where we send out a bi-weekly preparedness and resilience bulletin, and we send out a weekly webinar announcement with all of the upcoming webinars, then just email us if you haven't already. Put your name in the top pod that was there specifically for that purpose. So 3 minutes to spare that you get back of your day. John, thank you. Listeners, thank you. And we look forward to hosting you again in the near future. Have a great day.